All right, so today I have a guest speaker, a guest conversator with me. We've got the depression doctor and the anxiety doctor. So this was obviously a pairing that needed to happen. We've been working hard on making it happen, and it finally is happening. We have Dr. Russell Kennedy. Thank you so much for joining us, Russell.
Oh, it's great, Scott. It's that, yeah, as you say, the anxiety and depression, like so often they go together, but one tends to predominate, and I read your book and it was kind of like, yeah, I see the depression start and I was always sort of comparing, okay, like how does he look at the world as opposed to how I look at the world? And it was really interesting.
Yeah, it's you know, I don't necessarily want to dive too far into this yet because this is a big
Sure,
existential topic. But as I'm
sure.
sure you know, a lot of people in our field notice the overlap between depression and anxiety is so prevalent. Some people have even wondered if it's the same thing.
Yep.
If there's some kind of common factor underlying both. And I agree with you that I think for a lot of people, certainly myself included, like it's definitely more so one than the other. I mean, I've had my fair share of anxiety, don't get me
Hmm.
wrong, but depression has really been the true constant in my life, whereas anxiety's been a very intermittent thing, kind of depending more on circumstances. Do you align with the idea that depression and anxiety do have some kind of core, like underlying common factor or pathology, or do you see them as two ultimately
I,
separate conditions that
yeah.
just overlap a lot?
No, I think that they start with a very similar place. I think anxiety and depression both start with a similar place. Usually there's some sort of separation. And it could be, not to get too woo, but it could be in your history. It could be inherited. There's a lot of places where, we're trying in medicine, trying to nail down this is the cause. There's so many different causes. But I think we're sort of genetically predisposed to, I think, manifesting one way or another. So my theory of anxiety is that it's really this state of alarm that's held in the body from some kind of separation. Usually it's childhood trauma, ACEs, and that sort of stuff, but not always. And that alarm tends to manifest into either hypervigilance, anxiety, or, deep parasympathetic depression. And I think the alarm is the cause for both, but they just manifest differently depending on, your genetic predisposition, your life experience, and, kind of how your brain reinforces the world.
Yeah. I know that your work, your content in particular, you emphasize a lot the importance of like being in touch with your body, paying attention
Mm.
to your body. Um, I obviously agree that there's tremendous value in that. In fact, this is related, not quite the exact same thing. My doctoral dissertation was on using movement, physical activity or
Yep.
exercise, primarily as a treatment for mood disorders, but we know it's tremendously beneficial for anxiety as well. I know a question that I get a lot from like therapy clients and coaching clients when I'm trying to do, more somatic or more
Mm.
body-driven work with them is they like the idea. There's obviously a lot of science
Sure.
behind it, and I think you can get people on board with the idea relatively easily most of the time. Where I often end up in the weeds with people is the application, like
Yeah.
specific strategies or kind of the how behind getting in touch with your body and being more aware of what's happening inside. Would you mind just sharing like maybe some of your favorite strategies that for you do help you get in touch with your body?
Yeah, I think self-touch. I think to start, it's so easy. Just put your hand over your chest, put your hand over your heart, put your hand over your throat. What I like to do is isolate where people feel the alarm in their body, because so often we don't even look to think in our body because we're so fixated on trying to solve it with our mind. We don't even think there's somewhere else. But I'll take somebody into like a trauma that they had when they were younger, not the worst trauma of their life, but I'll take them into a trauma that they had. And then we'll just sort of like, can we slow this down? Relax your shoulders, relax your jaw, close your eyes. Can you take yourself in your mind's eye back to that place where the teacher hit you, or, you're walking home and you think your mother might be drunk? Where is that? Where does it? It's like, well, I feel this sort of vague stuff maybe in my throat. It's like, okay, is it superficial? Is it deep? It's kind of in the middle. Does it have a temperature? Is it hot, cold? Is there some? I try to get into the as much of the somatic experience as possible, because I do think a lot of these pathways, these neural pathways that mediate anxiety and depression are subcortical. They're below the level of the thinking mind. And that's the way we have to treat them, I think. I mean, if we're having this subcortical neural firing that creates anxiety or creates depression, we're not going to fix that with cortical solutions to it. It's going to help. It's going to help. And that's what I found with me is that after 30 years of therapy, once I started getting this place, this sort of structured, stable place in my body, and I started looking into my body and stabilizing my body, then a lot of the cognitive stuff that I learned sort of fell into place. Like it's kind of like the icing on the cake. But itself, I don't, I really have, especially with anxiety, I don't see solving it technically or solving it logistically or logically makes much of a difference for anxiety people. It's more, can they feel safe in their body? Can they start rewiring that default mode that keeps, flickering and telling them that they're never going to amount to anything. They're too fat, they're too skinny, they're whatever. It's really getting into this subcortical place, and as we feel more, because it's a feeling issue, depression is a feeling issue, anxiety is a feeling issue, we're going to solve it with a feeling solution. The thinking solutions can help. So, what I will often do is get people to put their hand on their chest or their throat or wherever they feel the alarm and just breathe into it and just stay with it. And often people will immediately feel some relief from that because I do think the alarm in our system that mediates our anxiety and our depression is the younger version of us that didn't really get their needs met. And when you start putting your hand over that and connecting with that part of you, it starts getting its needs met in a way that it didn't when you were younger. Breath is another great one. Physiological sigh, you can't beat that as far as, immediate regulation, that kind of thing. And it's really, just making the conscious intention to get out of your head. That's probably the biggest thing because you're not going to solve it with your mind. A lot of people with anxiety and certainly the ruminated aspect of depression, you just go over the same thing over and over and over, the same sort of cortical loop over and over. And it's just like get out of your head first. And then once you stabilize and ground in your body, then you can go back into your head. But while you stay in your head, nothing really gets solved. And in fact, it just often makes things worse.
Speaking of anxiety, for so many people, the biggest source of anxiety is money. Whether you're worried about long term goals like retirement or sending your kids to college, or more immediate needs like paying your mortgage this month or affording your groceries this week, money is a constant source of stress in the lives of just about everyone. And while I cannot promise you a way out of financial stress entirely, I can tell you that it doesn't have to feel like something that is ruining your life and controlling your mental health, thanks to the sponsor of today's content, Monarch. Monarch is a private, ad-free, all-in-one budgeting and financial tracking system. There are no ads, there's no selling your data. Monarch just gives you one nice, clean dashboard that shows you everything you need to see to keep track of your finances. I really appreciate how easy it is to use on multiple platforms. Any data I enter on my phone gets synced up to the website on my PC and vice versa. And I also want to note that the app itself is a very, very low stress app. It's not going to be one of those things where it's sending you 10, 15 alerts every day and stressing you out like some other budgeting apps do. It is a great way to stay on track with this very important part of your life without allowing it to take over your life. If you want to check out Monarch and take control of your finances, head to the link in the description of today's video or scan the QR code on the screen to get started with 50% off your first month. That's a
Yeah,
great answer. And that's, I mean, you partially answered already the most asked question when I asked my YouTube channel. I said, "Hey, I'm going to be talking with an anxiety expert soon. What do you guys want me to talk to him about?" And the most popular question was, "Why do you think CBT fails for so many people?" And I think
yeah.
you've addressed quite a bit of it with your answer there. I would also say that your description there really matches my own personal experience quite a bit.
Mm.
I am a good debater. I'm good at arguing. In fact, one of the careers I considered was law.
Sure.
I thought about being a lawyer, and that's actually part of what I love about my job is I feel like I basically get to argue with the dark thoughts that people have. So it's like the best of both worlds. But
Mm.
I'm good at arguing, and yet, to your point, when I try to reason or rationalize or argue my way out of my own anxiety, I can usually win for maybe 5 minutes.
Hmm.
I'll score some point and I'll make some really difficult to argue, idea, and my anxiety will kind of be all right. and it'll kind of chill for
Yeah.
about, and then about 5 minutes later, but did you think about this? I'm like, oh crap. Nope, I didn't. And then even when it works, the amount of time that I spend, as you said, in my own head, debating with myself, relative to the amount of time that I feel relief from doing so is, I don't know, 10 to 1, 20 to
Yeah.
1. I mean, I spend my whole day doing it. I'm not present with my family, I'm not enjoying, like I get these little breaks in the clouds where I'm like, okay, it's gonna be okay. And then 5 minutes later, boom, no, it's not. And just to be clear, I am a CBT guy. I'm a big
Okay.
fan of CBT. I like
And I am too.
CBT. Yeah, yeah,
I am
it's
too.
helped me
Yeah.
a lot. But I
Yeah.
also read the research, and we know, it's like 50 to 60% of people
And it wears
benefit from
off.
it. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of people out there who are doing CBT that just aren't really getting where they want to be from it. I'm a level one sensory motor trained psychotherapist. And
Mm.
that also involves, of course, a lot of somatic work, a lot of like working through where certain tension states are held in the body. And I have seen a lot of my clients have, this might be a bold claim, but I'm going to say breakthroughs. They certainly felt like breakthroughs at the time.
Mm.
People who've been in more traditional talk therapies for 10, 15 years, they know every kind of thought challenge there is. They know what their belief systems are. Their, sleep hygiene and nutrition are not bad, not the
Yeah.
Achilles heel anyway, not
Right.
the biggest point of constraint. And they still get stuck. And for a lot of people, I have seen somatic work be that next step that really unlocks like a further level of relief. As I was saying that, I was reminded of something else I've heard you talk about a lot that I personally related to a lot, which is the addictive properties of worry. Now, people who
I
don't, I'm
just wrote
guessing,
that down,
did
Scott.
you really?
I just wrote that down. It's like this is my next point that I'm gonna make.
Yep, yep.
No,
It,
no, that's exactly what I wrote down.
and
Yeah.
it's one of those things, if people haven't experienced it, it sounds like the weirdest thing, right? Like, how could you be addicted to something that's miserable and awful? But as soon as I saw like one of your reels where I instantly was like, oh, I know what he's talking about there.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about what you've observed with regards to how worry can be addicting and what helps people, in your experience, like move past that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people who have anxiety had some, really painful uncertainty when they were younger. Really painful, alcoholic father, abusive, whatever. And I think we really developed this sense that certainty is what we need. We will avoid uncertainty at all costs. And one of those costs is accepting a worry, because what worry does is it makes the uncertain appear a little more certain. So, if you have, pain in your shoulder, that kind of thing, it's like, oh, is this cancer? My aunt had bone cancer, and you just go down the rabbit hole. Now, there is something in the mesolimbic and the mesocortical dopamine systems of our brain that love certainty and reward us for certainty. So, if you got this pain in your shoulder and think, oh, it could be cancer, your brain goes ding, 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 ding. You're on the right track. This could be cancer. So you get a little dopamine hit from that. So we're actually being trained, like conditioned to worry, because we're so afraid of uncertainty that we will accept a horrible worry over just leaving something uncertain. And I think that's a run through that I see with anxiety all the time, is this profound intolerance of uncertainty. And what I will do with my clients, patients, whatever you want to call them, is I'll say, even when you're sitting in a restaurant and you're deciding between, the pizza or the burger, whatever, just sit in there and go, this is uncertain and I can handle this. Just little points in your life where there's so much uncertainty that we deal with every day. But just reward yourself for allowing something to be uncertain and seeing if you can sit in that uncertainty. Because if you can build that uncertainty intolerance, you start weakening that 12-lane superhighway that fires you into worry every time something appears something out of control. When something appears uncertain or out of your control, immediately worriers will go to, I've got to hypervigilantly explain this to keep myself safe. And I'm saying, no, you've got to do the opposite. You actually have to sit in the uncertainty. Now that's easier said than done, of course, but that's the pathway. The worry is just going to lead you to more worry.
Yeah. That's a great point too about the dopamine hits. I honestly
Yep.
hadn't really fully considered it from that perspective, but I'm thinking obviously I'm going to keep this confidential, but I'm thinking of a client I'm working with right now who's got sort of this outstanding thing that could be really bad that she's not going to know for several months.
Right. Yeah.
And she keeps trying to gather information that makes it seem less likely. This thing has maybe, I don't know, a 10-20% chance of happening.
Right.
It's more likely that it will be okay than
Hmm.
not. And she knows that.
Right.
But she wants to be more sure that it's going to be okay. And
Yeah.
so, there's a lot of dialogue with other people, there's a lot of research, and and more and more she's learning is making her think there's less and less of a chance that the really, really scary thing is going to happen, which is, of course, a pleasant feeling, which creates,
Hmm.
as you said, the dopamine hit and the addiction. But I think the big catch 22 with that is you're never going to get to like zero point 0.0, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to convince yourself that you are 100% confident that the
Yeah.
bad thing isn't going to happen. And as long as that loophole exists, even if it's a fraction of a percent,
Hmm.
your anxiety isn't going to treat that as much differently as if it's 20 or 30% because it's still an option on the table. And so
Totally.
in addition to everything you've said, something I often add to that as well is focusing more on the what your next steps will be if that thing occurs.
Hmm.
Because we often end the inquiry at the what if. And it's
Yes.
almost treated like in what is the word? What's the kind of question where you don't actually expect someone to answer?
Rhetorical.
Rhetorical
Yeah.
question. Thank you. We treat the what ifs in our mind. What if I have cancer? What if I
Yep.
get fired? What if my house burns down? We treat them as rhetoricals, as if those aren't things that a person can do. Like obviously those are all terrible things. Don't get me wrong. I
Yep.
don't wish those things on anybody, but those are all things that like you still have action steps that you can engage after they happen to minimize the damage from those things in your life and get yourself back on track. It doesn't end when the scary thing happens. And so often I think all of this preparation doesn't actually leave you prepared for like, well, then what am I going to do if it does? And if you have a plan that you trust, I think for a lot of people, that is more reassuring than just trying to convince yourself it's not going to happen. Because that's ultimately an empty reassurance. It's never going to be zero point 0.0.
Yeah. And it comes back to this sort of alarm state that I sort of keep harping on about with people is that there's an alarm state that's held, it's either held in your body or held in the brain's representation of the body. It doesn't really matter. So what people do is they have this alarm state in their system and they don't want to feel that. So what they did as children was they said, well, I'm going to dissociate, I'm going to distract, I'm going to go up in my head and worry because that temporarily takes me away from feeling this sensation of alarm. So it's really about, can you find the alarm? Could you put your hand over it? Can you connect with it? Because that's probably the younger version of you. That's the first thing. The second thing is just understanding that, and this is what I have lots of people that have like, cancer follow-ups, heart follow-ups, all this kind of stuff. And I say to the same thing. It's, you have to develop a sense of faith. You really, and not really just faith necessarily, but just a faith that this is the bucket you can put it into. I'm just going to leave this to faith. And I say this to myself maybe hundreds of times a week. When I worry about something, I'm just going to leave this to faith. Now, initially, it's very difficult because your brain that loves certainty is going to scream at you going, we can't do that. We can't do that. But as you build the muscle of faith and just realize that, yes, if this thing does happen, we will deal with it. Everyone's had bad crap happen to them in their past and they've dealt with it. And the thing about anxiety is it makes you overestimate threat and underestimate your own resilience and resource to be able to deal with it. So developing a sense of faith and just saying, I'm just going to leave this to faith, just getting a worry and going, I'm just going to leave this to faith. Now it's really hard initially because it's so seductive to sort of, go back into that worry, go back into that story, because like I said, you do get a little dopamine hit from that. But what I'm saying is that once you develop this muscle of I'm just going to leave this to faith, you start seeing that, hey, I actually can handle uncertainty. I have resources for uncertainty now. Because if you have no resources for uncertainty and faith being a resource, of course you're going to keep worrying.
No, I love that. And yeah, I agree. There's multiple angles you can approach that from. You know, for a lot of people, it is a spiritual faith or a religious faith, and many people do find tremendous comfort and
Yep.
value in that. Again, that's one of the things the research is quite clear on. Like if you have a faith system, that helps you with depression, that helps you with anxiety. I also do understand, as you clearly do, that that's not always something that's immediately accessible for a person. And sometimes another thing that you can have faith in, really, you already said this, I'm just kind of putting my own spin on it, but faith in your own problem solving ability. If you
Right.
look at what have I dealt with in my past,
Exactly.
that is kind of like this. Like, what's the closest thing to this that I've ever been through, and how did it turn out? And when I say how did it turn out, you got to look at the whole story. Because if you're like, well, it was terrible, like, yeah, I know, like
Yep.
that the day it happened was a
Yep.
terrible day. Of course,
Yep.
no disagreement. But, where did it end up with your life at in a year or 5 years? I actually invert this exercise sometimes. I think I have this bad habit of saying I invented things and then finding out that, like, I
It's true.
independently
I have the
thought
same
about
thing. Yeah,
this,
I know. I have the same thing. Yeah.
but I'm not the first
Right.
to have done so.
Right.
So this may or may not be something I came up with, but I like to, in order to help people see what you're describing, I like to have them take something in their life right now that is really important to them, really precious to them. That can be a relationship. It can be a status like a career or a degree. It can be a physical possession. It can be faith itself. It's anything that's important to this person.
Mm.
And we'll put this in like the center of a piece of paper or a poster board or something like that. And around it ends up kind of looking like a spider web. Around it, I'll have them identify what are the core, maybe four, five, six big things that had to happen in your life to get this thing. And
Yeah.
they'll come up with a few things, and then we'll pick one of those, and we'll do the same thing. What had to happen for that to happen? I have never in my entire, and I've done this with a lot of people,
Mm.
I have never gotten more than 3 layers
Yeah.
before we end up at something that at the time that thing happened, the person was convinced it was a crisis that would permanently and negatively define their life.
Right.
But it's the butterfly effect. Basically, you remove this thing from your life. Now you don't have this. You don't have this central thing that you love that gives your life so much richness and value right now. And it's not, I'm not a toxic positivity kind of guy. Well, everything's
No,
going to have
I know.
yeah, things
I've
can
read your
be,
book.
yeah, I'm about as far away from that as you can
Yeah.
get. But I do think it is really important to recognize, like, you don't ever know the long-term impact of anything that occurs in your life. And I do know from personal experience, as I'm sure you do, terrible things can create good in our lives. Now, sometimes you don't always see those
At the
outcomes
time.
for 20 or 30 years
Yeah.
sometimes. It can be a
Totally.
long game, but you just never know what it's going to mean down the road.
Yeah, and as a general practitioner, I practiced for 22 years, and I saw people say that their heart attack was the best thing that ever happened to them. Their cancer was the best thing that ever happened to them because it shook them out of this sort of, day-to-day doldrums of just not appreciating what they had, among other things. But so many things that we think, oh, if this bad thing happens, it's the end of my world. And I think that often goes back to childhood because when we're in a helpless and powerless situation, when we're children, I think that imprints on our system. It imprints on our subcortical system for sure. So when we face a trauma or a potential trauma in the future, we project that that is going to be this sort of endless blackness that it was when we were stuck in our room and we were listening to our parents scream at each other. So I think there is this sense that there's this age regression that goes along with anxiety and depression, and I really do believe that it is this state that we sort of slide back into. It is an age regression. When I see someone with anxiety and a deep panic attack, I always tell them you're in an age regression right now. You believe that you can't handle this because you've age regressed to a time when you were 8 or 10 years old and you were in a situation that you had no control over, but you're an adult now. You have much more control over your situation in your life than you did back then. But your brain is telling you that you're going back to this helpless, hopeless situation that you experienced when you were a child.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of correlates with some other like really important principles there. Like obviously, a lot of learned helplessness can be
Totally.
involved in that. Um, And something I like to educate people on a lot too, I know you're a neurobiology guy, is like the limbic system looks for patterns, right? And that's
Yeah.
of course, fully formed by the time you're what, two? So something like
Yeah.
that. I might be a little off on that, but
Well,
young.
yeah. I mean, by the age of 5, 80% of your brain is developed.
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, our prefrontal cortex is where looking for deviation, among other things, looking for
Mhm.
deviations from patterns comes into play. And so, really early traumatic experiences, or even just very difficult experiences, they don't even necessarily have to reach the level of
Right.
trauma. Obviously, those are going to become things that we have heightened reactivity to in the future because that part of your brain says, this is just like that time
Totally.
when this terrible thing happened. And then that, of course, starts to be because then your limbic system becomes hyperactivated. It starts to draw resources away from your prefrontal cortex, which is
Exactly.
the part of your brain that would say, hey, actually, this is somewhat similar, but
Yep.
there are a few key differences, such as the fact that we are now an adult with autonomy and money in a car. And
Yep.
that changes a lot of things about how helpless we are in certain stressful situations. But when that part of your brain is pretty offline because of overwhelming psychological distress, those coping tools aren't super accessible to you.
Yeah, and it's something that reminds me of something because this is what I always tell my clients, patients is that look at your stressors as challenges instead of threats. Because if you look at your stressors as a challenge, this is a challenge. This cancer is a challenge. This is challenge. You will create oxytocin. You'll create dopamine in your brain, which allows you to move forward. If you look at it as a threat, you will create cortisol and norepinephrine, which basically puts you more into a victim stance. And when you're in a victim stance, you paralyze the prefrontal cortex, you paralyze the rational brain. You make more, not only do you make more worries, but you also paralyze the part of your brain that would tell you, hey, these worries aren't anything to worry about.
That reminds me a lot of something else I've heard you say frequently, which is I say the exact same thing with different words. I think we're literally saying the same thing with different terminology.
Yep.
You talk about separating the facts from the narrative. I often tell people, let's look at which part of that thought is subjective and which part is
Yeah.
objective, which I think is the exact same idea.
Yep.
It is truly amazing if you just break it down to the facts or the objective elements of your distress, elements of your challenges right now. In most cases, not in every case,
Yeah.
in most cases, what a small fraction of our distress that really is.
Yeah.
So much of it, I visualize it as like a bar graph with two bars, right?
Yep.
The bottom level is there are physical realities that you're dealing with right now. There are stressors that are as real as they could be, right? You have a health challenge, or you're dealing with financial stressors, or you have a disabled child. Like these are real things that bring with them a certain level of distress that cannot meaningfully be rejected or discarded. It can be coped with, but
Right.
it's there and you
Yep.
can't get rid of it. And then the second layer is the story you tell yourself about that.
Hmm.
What do you think this means? What does this say about you? What does this look like in the future? And at least for me, I'd be curious to know what
Yep.
what you think your ratios are. I feel like that bottom bar for me is usually maybe 10 to 20%. And the vast majority of the emotional distress I experience is because of this narrative I
Story.
craft around it.
Yeah.
Do you think your ratio is pretty
I think it's
similar?
about the same. I think
Yeah.
it's about the same for sure. You know, we have this default mode network in our brain. It's kind of like
Mhm.
the daydreaming circuits of our brain. When we're not focused on something specific, when we're not using our task positive network, the thing that would sort of direct us into something, we fall into this default mode. And this default mode is programmed when we're younger. So if we're in distress when we're younger, we will often have the same story over and over and over again as we fall into this default mode. This is kind of like, when you go through a breakup and you go to work and you're kind of okay at work, but when you get home after work, after your brain isn't focused on something, then it all hits you again. And the default mode, we fall into it many, many, many times a day. And it gets programmed. Yeah, it's you procrastinate too much, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're not smart. This stuff gets sort of fed into us time and time and time. So I wonder how anybody can heal from anxiety and depression with this default mode constantly sort of echoing this negative version of yourself. And I do think that we can reprogram the default mode, but we have to do it through sensation and through presence rather than just telling the default mode that no, I'm not this way. Instead of I'm weak, I'm very strong. I do this. There's all this kind of this Byron Katie stuff, which is great. I think Byron Katie is amazing, but I think we fall way too quickly into the intellectualizing of our pain rather than just allowing ourselves to feel it. And so much of the story is us just distracting from the pain of alarm in our body. So if we have this alarm in our body and we can go into this story, temporarily we kind of avoid this sense of alarm, this sensation of alarm, but we never actually deal with it. It's like trying to learn the guitar by never actually, or reading, 500 books on guitar, but never actually picking up the guitar and trying to play it. So it's really, we have to actually play the pain. And this is why our society is so hell bent on not feeling negative emotion. We have to feel negative emotion to be able to process through it. In my field in anxiety, so much of my patients have unresolved anger and unresolved grief, things that didn't get resolved when they were younger. And if something doesn't get resolved, it has this open loop that really sucks the default mode network into trying to solve it, solve it, solve it. And then we can't. So what we do, the poor cousin to solving it, is creating a story about it. And that story distracts us from the pain, and it just keeps reverberating in our system when we never actually deal with the alarm because we're too busy getting stuck in story.
That need to distract from the distress.
Mm.
Do you think that might be why there's a relatively small, I don't know the exact number, subsection of both the depressed and anxious population that is actually like absurdly high achieving,
Hmm.
like CEOs, entrepreneurs,
Yep.
doctors,
Doctors. Yeah.
people who work 60, 70 hours a week, unbelievable career accolades. And they are deeply depressed, tremendously anxious, both in some cases. You mentioned going home from work after a breakup, and that's when it hits you. I know for a lot of people, it doesn't hit them till they lay down and try to go to sleep because
Mm.
every other second of their day is just crammed full of distractions. And
Totally.
especially if they're socially approved of distractions. Again, work, the gym is one. And obviously,
Yeah.
I love the gym, but anything can become problematic if overused. Do you think that's where these people kind of come from? That they are maybe hyper achieving because they don't want to sit with their own thoughts or bodily sensations for, more than 5 seconds if possible?
Yeah, they never learned to. And the thing is, this is what happens with really smart people too, is that they learn how to intellectualize things, to work in their prefrontal cortex, to work in their wheelhouse. So if you're really good at intellect, but you're not that great at emotion, you are going to live your life where you slowly move more and more and more and more into your intellect. And you can distract as well with that. But I see this with people who are really intelligent. A lot of anxiety people are really intelligent because they've been going to the overthinking gym since they were 5 years old. So it is one of those things that because they get so adept at thinking, they don't actually learn how to feel. And if you don't learn how to feel, your relationships are going to suffer. Like we saw a lot of our doctors, who win all these awards, but they never see their family, right? So it's like these people are being put on a pedestal. This amazing doctor has done this, but they don't have any home life. Entrepreneurs, kind of like the same thing. Entrepreneur is another word for me for never going to be happy. They're always looking for the next distraction. They're never happy with what they have. And I think because they are good at that particular thing, and that's why I say to people, like, be careful what you're good at, because this is probably where you're going to distract and you're going to get better and better and better at this particular skill that you have. But if that skill isn't in the emotional realm, you are going to become less emotionally savvy as you get older. And I see this so much with people. Like they do okay until, they hit their late 30s. And then there's relationship issues, there's kids issues, there's stuff that, human interaction issues. And they just can't handle them because they don't really know how to feel.
So hypothetically, if I knew a guy, early 40s, entrepreneur, writes books, does social
Sure.
media, and maybe is, the exact type of person you just described
Yep.
and doesn't come from a super emotionally aware family in the first place, What might be two or three things maybe that that person, could be doing on their own time to try to maybe kind of get this thing moving in the opposite direction?
Well, I think it's awareness, like just becoming aware, like, hey, if you're on your third divorce, if your kids don't speak to you or whatever, you're not emotionally that savvy. And then you can't just go from being emotionally sort of unintelligent to emotionally kind of connected. But just making that connection with yourself, I think is just so important. I have this acronym I call SHOULD. And this is what you should have got when you were younger. You should have been seen, should have been heard, should have been open to by your parents, understood. At least people would make an effort to understand you, love and defend. That's what it sounds like. See, hear, open to, understand, love and defend. Now, if you didn't get that, which a lot of us didn't,
Mhm.
you can start giving that to yourself. So I get people to put a picture of themselves up in their bathroom mirror. They don't have to talk to it. They don't have to, I think I love you. You're such a special, you don't have to do any of that sort of stuff. But you just make this intention. I'm going to see you. I'm going to connect with you. I'm going to see you. I'm going to hear. And then sometimes I'll take people into a process where I sort of, and I'm speeding this up a lot, relax your shoulders, relax your jaw, you know, close your eyes. Now, see if you can see the younger version of you at a point in your life that wasn't that great for you. And see if you can see their eyes, see if you can see what they're wearing, and just really see if you can connect with them. And then what would they say to you? What would that child say? And often it takes a while before the child says something. Sometimes they will, but often because we've been ignoring this child for so long and they've felt ignored for so long that they're not that really effusive about, telling you what's going on. So you really have to keep going back to this. I see you. I see you. What do you have to say to me? I'm open to you. I want to understand you. I love you. I'm going to defend you. I'm going to give you now what you didn't get back then. That is a great place to start for people because it's sort of it points you right at the root cause of where your emotional disconnection began because it began when you were a child, more than likely. There are other causes for sure. Not everything is trauma.
Yeah.
But most of the stuff that I see, and probably most of the stuff that you see, is trauma, right? So it's just learning how can you develop a strategy that has an easy entry to it, and that you can do on your own, and that you keep doing it. The problem is that people won't do it because it's just too emotional. But that's why it's like it's just getting a picture of yourself. I have a picture of myself on my iPhone. I have a picture of myself in my bathroom mirror. You don't have to talk to it. Although if you can talk to it, it does help. And as you get better and better at connecting to that younger version of you, you start seeing where you separated your narration from your emotion. And if you can get back to that place, that fork in the road where you can start saying, "Hey, let's see if we can develop that emotional sense." And this is where a therapist helps as well. But just making that intention that you are going to connect with yourself is so important at an emotional level because there are these really, really successful people who are really intelligent, but they're emotionally quite stunted.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not Stuart Smalley style
Right.
affirmations, right? It's
No.
just as a starting point, seeing yourself as a human being
Yeah.
and being willing to extend yourself the basic level of caring and respect and support that you would
Yeah.
give to even a stranger,
Yes.
perhaps, like someone who you have no relationship with as a baseline, and ideally expanding upon that. I talk to people a lot about the importance of the relationship that they have with themselves.
Hmm.
And many people even just balk at the concept of that. Like, I
Totally.
don't have I don't have a relationship with myself. That doesn't mean anything. And so I'll ask them to, well, how do you define a relationship? Because there's people out there you have a relationship with, and there's obviously
Right.
people out there you don't have a relationship, right? How do you know what category people go in? And usually it's something along the lines of, well, if I talk to someone regularly, spend time with them on occasion, and have some level of emotional reaction to things they do, that's a relationship. Well, you have all three of those things with yourself. And in fact, at least in terms of how much you talk to this person, most of us talk to ourselves more than we talk to every other human being on earth
Hmm.
combined. So not
Yeah.
only is it a relationship, it's a very, very important relationship. And something I was reminded of as you were talking about like the picture and the should acronym. I'm going to keep this story kind of brief because I
Sure.
don't want it to be it could be kind of a graphic story otherwise. But um, something I learned early on in life was that caring for something makes you care about that thing, and vice versa. If you don't care for something, you won't really care about that thing. My paternal grandparents were hog farmers, and they were about 6 hours away from where we grew up. So we'd go, when we visited them, we'd stay for like a week, and we basically would become farmers for a week.
Hmm.
I would help out with, me and my siblings, we'd help out with all the farm chores and whatnot, and we absolutely loved it. And I remember one day, in retrospect, this was a very inappropriate assignment, and no one seemed to notice that. But I think I was maybe 10, roughly guessing. My grandfather said that they had a mice problem in the barn, and the mice were eating all the feed. And he would pay us, I don't remember how much, maybe $1 for every mouse we killed. And we
Right.
wanted money, so we're like, all
Yeah.
right, let's go do it. First of all, we only managed to catch one mouse, so we were going to earn at most $1.
Right.
Um, we ended up killing it by accident. That's the part of the story I won't go into.
Okay.
Anyway, we all just basically started crying as soon as
Yeah.
we realized what happened. We ran back into the house and we were all distraught because we were sad for the mouse. And I remember, and I'm not saying this to throw anybody on the bus. It's a memory with a lesson in it. I remember my dad's attempt to basically get us to calm down
Right.
was he said something along the lines of like, mice die every second of every day. Why are you bothered by this one?
Hmm.
And although that didn't make me feel any better,
Right.
I do remember going to bed at night thinking that's a fair question though. Like what? Because I know that's true. I'm like, why did I have an emotional reaction to just this mouse? But there's a mouse dying right now in a trap
Yep.
somewhere that I'm not having any emotions about
Yeah.
because I didn't care for that mouse.
Right.
And that rule that the art of care, not the art, the act of caring for something makes you care about that thing, and neglecting something makes you not care about that thing. That is also true for ourselves and for
Yeah.
our relationship with ourselves. And that's why I think so many of us, especially once you get into adulthood and you get more responsibility, you get more obligation, you have careers, houses, kids, whatever you end up signing up for,
Yep.
you end up taking care of a lot of other things with most of your time. And there isn't always a whole lot left over for you, right? And so I think it's really easy for us to end up in this downward spiral of just like not doing anything for ourselves and then not really regarding ourselves as a person who is worth doing anything for. And that just keeps you going further and further down that spiral of, worthlessness and low self-esteem and what's the point of me even being here anymore? And there's always this awkward, very artificial seeming stage when you try to get out of that of, like you said, putting the picture on the mirror of like at first it's probably going to feel really awkward and
It
weird,
does.
right?
Yeah.
Like what am I doing? Who am
Yeah.
I that I think I should be doing this? And maybe you do. I'm curious to know. I don't know of a way around that. I think there's always this awkward period where you
Yeah.
just kind of feel like an actor preparing for a play. And I always tell people, you got to just kind of power through that and it won't last forever. But do you have any shortcuts for circumventing that like weird fake feeling kind of phase of this?
Yeah, it's just awareness and intention. Just making the intention. It's like, do I want to keep living in anxiety? Do I want to keep living in depression? Do I really want to stay here? And for some people, because it's familiar, human beings equate familiarity with security. So if you're familiar with your anxiety, there is a pull to stay in anxiety. If you're familiar with depression, there is a pull to stay in depression because it's what you know. The brain likes familiarity. It doesn't like uncertainty. But making that intention, like, I don't want to live like this. I know it feels contrived. Humor is really good at this point. It's like, this seems so silly. This seems so ridiculous. But Dr. Kennedy says it helps. Dr. Eiler says it helps. Let me give it a try. And I think so much of life is intention because your subconscious mind wants a pathway. It wants a blueprint. It wants a program. And if we don't give it one, it will run on the one that it runs
Mhm.
automatically, which is usually for us anxious, depressed people, not the greatest. Again, the default mode network, it runs into this place. So if you take control of your environment, you start reprogramming that default mode network. If you don't take control of your environment, you're going to get what you've always got. And I think that's where it really comes down to, like, how sick are you of living in anxiety? How sick are you of living in depression? Are you okay with trying something that may be uncomfortable? but I guarantee you it won't be as uncomfortable as sitting depressed all day or anxious all day because you're actually doing something. You're engaging your task positive network now. So you're actually moving towards something as opposed to trying to move away from something. You're moving towards something that helps you as opposed to trying to avoid something that hurts you. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does. There is one thing I want to know a little bit more about, though, is when you say take control of your environment,
Yep.
do you mean more just your inner environment, your thoughts, your feelings, your bodily sensations, or are you also referring to the external environment, like your home, your living situation, your office at work? Do you think that the physical environments we inhabit and the properties of them have a substantial impact on anxiety or mental health in general?
Yeah, but pick your battles, right? Because a lot
Yeah.
of us with anxiety and depression, we don't have a whole lot of extra energy to throw around. So it's like pick the top three and just, what are the things that actually move you? Like what does affect you? Like what do you like? What do you like? What did you like when you were a teenager? Did you like riding your bike? Did you like painting? Can you get back to that? Can you just get into this place where, maybe start engaging that right hemisphere, engage this sort of kind of more feeling aspect of your brain rather than having to avoid uncertainty so much that you stick in that known left hemisphere all the time. Pick your battles, pick the stuff. Yeah. Does it help having a clean environment? Absolutely, it does. Does it help going to the gym? Absolutely does. But start off slowly and then reward yourself. Reward yourself. I went to the gym. I only went for 15 minutes, but hey, I did. I made it. I did it. Rather than go, oh, you only went for 15 minutes. You only did 8 sets. Anybody can do. It's really how do you reprogram that default mode so that you're sort of giving yourself the best chance for when things do go bad. Because when they go bad, that default mode is going to really start, it's really going to start telling you all these things that didn't go well. So if you have some support set up for you when and the Mel Robbins 5 4 3 2 1 thing, like if you don't want to do something, 5 4 3 2 1, just do it. Just do it. And and there's a part of your brain called the anterior cingulate cortex, the mid anterior cingulate cortex. It's kind of like this is the part of your brain that helps you do hard things.
Mhm.
And the more you do hard things, the more you're likely to be able to do hard things in the future. But you're not going to go, start a marathon tomorrow. It's like really reward yourself for the times that you engage the should, see, hear, open to, understand, love, and defend yourself. Like today, the today version of you, as well as the child version of you. How can I do this in small increments? What can I do? Can I go make myself a cup of tea? Can I go and, treat myself to a coffee and a muffin somewhere and just really have the intention that you are going to look after yourself rather than this default state of kind of just meandering through life in your head and constantly stuck in all the narratives.
Wonderful. I love it. That is definitely something I can get some value out of. I have two last questions for you.
Sure.
One might be hard, the other's easy. Hard
Okay.
question first. It may not, you might have this totally ready to go, and I
Who
wouldn't be
knows?
shocked. If there was one thing that you could get, all your patients, all your followers, everyone who reads the book, like
Yep.
one thing that you could get everybody to do that you think would have the biggest net positive impact on their anxiety, what
Yep.
would be your go-to? Like this is the A1
This is the thing.
priority.
This
This is
is,
the thing.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you what the thing is. The
Nice.
thing is to find the alarm in your system when you're worried about something, get yourself out of your head. You're not going to get anywhere with your head. It's like, where do I feel this? What's going on? Is there something in the pit of my stomach? Is it hot? Is it sharp? Is it like, how does it feel? Put your hand over it, connect to it, stay with it. There is this mantra that I tell everybody. It's called sensation without explanation.
Mm.
Sensation, and I've said that to myself probably a million times now. Sensation, and just put your hand over it. When you're worried about something, find it in your body. And if you can't find it specifically, just use your heart space or your chest, you know, and just say sensation without explanation and just stay with the sensation and stay out of the explanation because it's the explanation that just makes it worse and worse and worse and worse because you're looking for something your brain is never going to find, but it will tell you that it can find it. So the biggest thing that I can tell everybody is learn how to feel your anxiety rather than think your anxiety. And once you feel it, see if you can stay with it. And because it's the younger version of you, if you can do that, see, hear, open to, understand, love, and defend that area, you're actually getting to the root cause of your anxiety as opposed to just, using coping strategies to avoid it. So the underlying thing is sensation without explanation. Learn how to stay in the sensation of your body, even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable, because then you learn how to metabolize it. If every time you feel this alarm in your system, you go in your head and worry, this alarm in your system never gets touched and it never changes, except maybe to get worse. So that would be my one thing that I would let everybody know.
Mhm. Sensation without explanation. That's a
Yep.
keeper. I'll be using that one tonight, no doubt about it.
Okay.
Last question for you.
Sure.
I understand you are developing an app that can
Yes.
help people reduce their anxiety. Could you tell me a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, it's called Anxiety
Mm,
instead of anxiety.
love it.
So the little catchphrase is turn your anxiety into anxiety. And it really looks at the chronic aspect of anxiety as well as the acute phase because, yes, breathing techniques and all this kind of stuff really helps in the acute phase, but you're really just putting a band-aid on it. So the chronic aspect of the app is like it has meditations in there. It has a meditation for should. It takes you through the whole thing in your mind. It shows you how to get into your body and stay in your body and be comfortable in that state as well. So it's really about how can we fix our anxiety in the acute phases when it's really hurtful? And then how can we actually get out of anxiety so that we're not actually doing this stuff over and over, like doing breathing techniques over and over and over again, because you're just putting a band-aid on it. You really want to help heal it. So yeah, it's called Anxiety. It's in the App Store being confirmed now. I don't know. My designer guy is telling me I don't know how long it takes. This is like 4 weeks, but 4 weeks in tech time could be 4 years. But I think it should be out fairly soon, and I'm really proud of it because again, it does help people get out of anxiety rather than just helping them feel better in the short term. It really helps you heal in the long term.
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely be checking out Anxiety. I'll be refreshing that store for it regularly. I can't wait for it to come out. That's got to be such a good feeling to know that you've helped create something that's going to help so many people. I
Well, and
love
you did
it.
with this too, right? Like this is
That was the
great.
goal.
Like these are all my little notes that I have on the top here.
That's a lot of
Yeah.
notes there.
It is. It is. There's a lot of places in there that I thought this is really helpful, and you've helped me help my patients too. What I loved about the book was that it came from this sort of storytelling, and I think it penetrated my psyche so much deeper with this storytelling format, like the story, the application, the lesson, the application, that penetrated so much more than a lot of the academic stuff that I read about the default mode network and all this kind of
Mhm.
stuff. It really put a really human aspect of it. And I think in these days of AI, where there's so much inauthentic stuff, that book is really authentic. I really loved it.
I really appreciate that. I mean, that was 100% the goal too. Like, anyone can synthesize research and put that
Sure.
out there, but I think when you know the backstory behind something, it makes you a little bit more likely, as you just said, to take it in a little bit more when you get where it's coming from, rather than just it being data.
And you can see it in you. Like I saw so many parallels in my childhood with yours.
Mhm.
And I think that's what moves us when we can start seeing ourselves in someone else's experience. So, thank you for the book.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm glad you enjoyed it. That means a lot. I have to tell you, one last quick thought. That when I reached out to you to see if you wanted me to send you a copy, that was a surreal moment for me because do you remember what you said when I
Well, I
said,
had already I had
yeah,
already ordered it.
that was a surreal moment for me, just so you
Okay.
know,
Yeah, okay.
because I had barely ever talked to you, but I've been
Yeah.
following you for a while.
Oh,
Like
me
I've
too.
known I've
Same.
known who you were for a
Same.
while.
Same.
So being like, "Hey, do you want a copy of my book?" And you're like, "I already pre-ordered it, but you
Yeah.
can still say it." I'm like, "Russell Kennedy has
Yeah.
pre-ordered my book."
Yeah.
That's one of those that's one of those moments that you don't see
Yeah.
coming. I'll put
No,
it
I,
that way.
I and I really enjoyed it too. It was one of those, like I said about, I read a lot of technical stuff, and it can be interesting too. Some of the authors are very good at making technical stuff understandable.
Yeah.
But when I put it down, it's like, okay, I've got to pick it up again. I've got to read it again, right? But with yours, it was like I didn't want to put it down, and then I really look forward to at night. It was on my bedside table. I really look forward to going to bed because I knew I was going to read some more stories about the lake and the fish because the fish that you experienced were very similar to the fish the perch and the sunfish and all. Like I went through that. That's what I fished for when I was a kid.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And thanks for the book. I really enjoyed it. It's a great book.
Yeah. Well, I think you've shared a lot of really valuable insights today that I know people are going to find good value from. And one last plug for Anxiety. Keep an eye out for that on the App Store. It sounds like it's going to be fantastic. Russell, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
It's been really nice talking with you, Scott. Thank you.